Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 210 of the Assorted Calibers Podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, is my lovely, intelligent, and radiant hostess, Erin Paulette. How you doing?
So, Weer'd, how long have you wanted to be Adrian Cronauer?
What year did that movie come out?
1990-something, I think.
That is the answer to your question.
Okay.
I didn't see it in the theater too, so it might have been the year after when it got released on HBO. No.
Oh my God. It was even earlier than that. 1987. Good Lord.
Yeah. So I just remembered. No, I got the VHS cassette of that for Christmas.
Kids, ask your parents.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh dear.
I mean,
right.
There's a lot of also AM talk radio hosts that always are big on the big energy start, and I like it. I admire it.
So I am doing adequate. I have nothing to report. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing adequate as well. I have very minimal signs of the Rona. My voice is still a little bit husky, but it's not. It was probably kind of mostly like this before too. Everyone's heard the shows where, like, at the very, very end, I'm sounding like the Crypt Keeper. So yeah, that's that. So everybody's healthy. Nobody has to wear masks. Nobody has to stay away from various stuff, and nobody feels like death warmed over. Woo woo. So yeah.
All right. In that case, let's just jump into the main topic, shall we?
Yes. So I actually wanted to start off with a little bit more information on Eli Dicken and the Greenwood Mall shooting in Indiana, because there's a bunch more information that came out since last week. It's actually for those who are patrons of the show, a lot of this did get covered in the mag dump because, well, we really wanted to dunk on the shooter and toss even more praise on Eli Dicken, as well as talk about Jack Wilson and Stephen Williford and some of the other heroes that have stood up when it came time for someone doing horrible evil and putting a couple of well-placed shots. So yeah, if you guys want to listen to it, that's up on Patreon. But there was a bunch of new information. The coolest one is that it's
okay. So Mr. Dicken retained the services of a lawyer, which is unfortunate but practical in this lawsuit crazy age, and he retained the services of Guy Relford. And what I found very interesting about this is that in the after effects of a shooting, when the news starts to come out, there's almost always a case of, oh, well, here's this hidden bit of awful. And I just was afraid that the professional dirt diggers would dig up something awful on Eli Dicken. And it turns out that he continues to defy the odds. And so his attorney, Guy Relford, issued a public statement indicating that even though he was... I'll do that again. Even though Indiana went constitutional carry 2 weeks ago, and the whole, oh, Eli was carrying illegally in the mall. No, he wasn't. But it turns out that he did indeed have a concealed carry permit from the state of Indiana, and the lawyer printed a redacted version of that. And so Mr. Dicken has been a licensed concealed carrier since August 4th, 2021. And I thought this was just delightful because it seemed to me to be the lawyer version of, y'all talking some crap about my client. And, I don't have to prove anything, but this is going to show just how full of BS you are. Bada bing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this tickled me. I am mightily pleased.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to. Twitter's being a jerk. Does it have his date of birth? No, it doesn't. It doesn't give his exact date of birth. But I'm wondering if he applied for this
2000.
on his 21st birthday. Yeah, he definitely got it when he was 21, which is the age of which you can apply for this lifetime license to carry permit.
Mm-hmm.
Another bit of information that has popped out is also that he has had no formal training whatsoever. He just learned to shoot from his grandpa.
And his grandpa should be teaching the police.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yep.
I believe we touched on this before, but just about every gun owner is going, wow, I feel really inadequate now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the kind of shooting that unless you're a competitive professional shooter, you're going to look at that and go, no, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, like for Jerry Mikulek wouldn't be a problem,
no.
But we're talking that level of competitive proficiency. And this guy, he's got no training. He's that good. It's a
yeah. Literally, the shooter emerged out of the bathroom, and within 15 seconds, Eli had drawn his gun, which is on most accounts a Glock 19, and fired 10 shots and landed 8 of them, and fatally killed the guy, and used a column as both a brace and cover.
It's my understanding that the first round hit. And that was the moment in which the Goblin decided he didn't want to be shooting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he attempted to run away. Of course, by that time, other rounds were headed down range and got him. Yeah. But again, this just drives home the point that pretty much any sort of spree shooter, when they encounter resistance, they decide they don't want to be a spree shooter anymore.
Yes, very true. And this is why we are so mad about the police in Uvalde, because the doctrine of the police is that you do not wait for backup. You don't even render aid to the wounded. You advance on the shooter and engage them, because the FBI information and all the analysis shows that the moment that range becomes a two-way range and they are no longer playing with the cheat codes, because again, these people seek out gun-free zones. It probably won't be known if the shooter specifically knew that this mall had a policy against carrying. Clearly, a lot of people knew that had no force of law, because
sure didn't stop him.
Yeah, Eli Dickin obviously had a gun, but also one of the victims also had a pistol on them. Also, I've heard Cam Edwards said he was contacted by somebody who told him not to reveal their name, but they were in the mall and they were legally carrying, but they weren't near the shooting. They just heard gunfire and stayed away. So either way, but I'm wondering if this killer made a very, very poor choice, and in fact thought that he was going to be the only gun in town. There certainly weren't any police there at the time. And he was not the only gun in town. And not only that, but he was hardly the best shot in town either, even with a rifle.
I mean, this is Indiana, for crying out loud. They are, to my knowledge, the only state that offers lifetime concealed carry permits. Florida, get on this.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, it's not even a laminated ID card. It's just a piece of paper. Third, there's no picture. I mean, it is as close to a state not caring as you can get from a state that still issues these permits. And of course, now that they're concealed carry, it's like, no, we really don't care.
No.
But I I could sit there and speculate as to what the goblin was thinking, but one, I don't want to try and get into his head, and two, people like this probably aren't thinking. So
he's certainly not anymore. I will also just say, just to further dunk on pictures of the assailant, specifically in side by sides of him doing a little glamour shot pose at home, probably before he ventured off to the place. He's certainly wearing the same clothes, but it doesn't look like it's from inside the bathroom. But there's a little glamour shot pose of this willowy little snowflake just before they got shot, and then after they got shot, with a nice little tag underneath his heel that says "dead." I assume people have said that the police have those tags just for when someone is confirmed dead on the scene. Just put them there so that the EMTs don't mess up the crime scene and don't waste their time on people that really aren't gonna receive any help. But either way, it's haha. And I will also proudly say that I have read the killer's name on multiple occasions, and I could on a dare I couldn't tell you what this guy's last name is. Or he's had an interesting last name. Couldn't tell you what his first name. I don't even know what his first name is. And the last name I just remember I'm sure I could develop a mnemonic, but I don't care. But Eli Dickin, I care. I'm committing his name to memory because he's a hero, and he, again, 10 shots, 40 yards, landed 8 of them in 15 seconds in a food court filled with people, and hit no bystanders.
You know, if it were to come out that Mr. Dickin were an Eagle Scout, not only would it not surprise me, I would just go, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or if he's been doing like IPSC or IDPA since he was like 10 years old. Certainly he has logged a whole bunch of trigger time, so good for him. And hey, guess what? We need to log some more as well.
God, yes. Oh, I need to dry fire.
So I think that clears up all the information that we might not have covered from the previous week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's all the good news. Now we've got some bad news and some idiotic news.
Yes.
So, I think it was last week. I'm not entirely sure. We talked about the assault weapons ban that was in Congress, and I predicted it was going to die in committee. And I hate to admit this, but I was wrong. It actually did pass the Judiciary Committee, and now it's going to go to the floor to a vote.
Yes.
And
that was a couple of days ago. It still hasn't been voted on. And so that is a little bit telling, because there was nothing stopping sending it straight to a, straight to a vote. I mean, we saw how fast the bipartisan bill went through. I thought for sure there was going to be some hemming and hawing when it went back to the House for ratification after the Senate approved it, but nope, it went right through. So if there was any priority to it, this would already be voted on, and we would know. But there is, let's see, we've got here Democratic reps Jared Golden of Maine and Henry Kuehler of Texas have said they will not support the bill. So these are two Democrats that say, nope, no thanks. A note again, Maine and Texas, two very Second Amendment friendly states. While Republican reps Chris Jacobs of New York and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, also note the states, have said they are open for voting for a ban, though this is definitely a much more tentative statement. They have not said that they are going to vote for it. They've just said that they are open to voting for it. So yeah, there is definitely some turbulence in the water for the what should be a very, very safe House vote. And then, of course, it's got to pass the Senate. Yes, and then
that's going to be a much harder pass.
Mm-hmm. And the Senate has the ability to alter the bill to grease the skids if they need to, because this bill is pretty bad. Actually, I've I have been hearing, I really haven't dove too deep into it because, again, I'm more interested to see what's going to happen and what's going to go through, because on one hand, this bill, Aaron, you predicted it was just going to die in committee. I said that it'll probably pass the House but die in the Senate. So I'm still not 100% sure that this is an actual threat to us. But again, especially if you've got reps that are listening, I'm probably not going to contact mine for obvious reasons. But if you do have reps and senators that are either moderate or strong on the Second Amendment, you should definitely contact them and say, this is a garbage bill, it's awful, and it's illegal. Because, of course, also, even if it does pass, I don't see how something as wide-reaching as this will pass muster in the court's interpretation of the Second Amendment.
I mean, I think it's very telling when there are Democrats who are going, "No, I'm not touching this," and that should tell you that there are people within the Democrat Party who regard gun control as a third rail.
Yes,
and
also how dirty the anti-Second Amendment guys are, the people that absolutely do not care anyway, anyhow, about it. They're voting for any gun control bill that's going through. There was Representative Dan Bishop of North Carolina called out to the House and saying, will anybody clarify the position on whether or not they believe that this bill would ban weapons that are in common use? And it was Jerry Nadler who responded that's the point of the bill. And so Bishop wanted to clarify. So the point of the bill is to ban guns that are in common use. And Nadler replied, the problem is that they are in common use. Wow. And Bishop was being very, very smart. I would not put it past Nadler of not getting this, but the whole point was in the ruling of the District of Columbia versus Heller, it stated that the idea that that they would ban firearms that are in common use, it was one of those key points that's constantly being referenced. I don't know if that was the full intention of it or if it was just a way of saying, look, we're not overturning the NFA today. That certainly seems to be something that the court really does not want to encompass, only because it is such a big and controversial and well-seated law. I would argue it's against the Second Amendment, but also it's the one that bans all the stuff that the argument ad absurdum goes through, where, crew served weapons and explosives and things like that are restricted. And so, yeah, they don't.
But still, the point remains that there is a SCOTUS ruling which states that firearms are protected under the Second Amendment if they are commonly used for self-defense.
Yes. And
these weapons are in common use. Therefore, the SCOTUS ruling applies.
Yep. Yeah. This is a one feature test. So therefore, guns like the AR-15. I mean, yes, there's the quote unquote featureless rifles, and who knows if they're going through. But any sort of form of AR-15 from the very first Armalite ones that Gene Stoner produced, all were guns that would be banned under this on the account that they have, pistol grips and flash hiders and threaded barrels and the such. So, yeah. And, even like a target gun that has a target crown instead of a threaded barrel would still likely have a pistol grip that would make it a evil banned gun. And they all come with removable magazines. So, yeah, the AR-15 would be outright banned by this. It would be grandfathered in, though my understanding is the grandfathering only deals with the current owner, and that you would not be able to transfer it even in the event of your death being passed on to your family members. It would be very similar to how Canada treats their AR-15s that are in civilian hands, in that you can have them, You can't take them to the gun range. They can't leave your house. And when you die, they have to go to the police to be destroyed.
I wonder if having them set up as a trust would work.
That certainly would be interesting.
I know. I just sprang this on you. I don't expect you to have an answer. That's me just thinking out loud.
Yeah. I mean, you could, given that they're non-NFA items, the challenging thing with NFA items, I know a few people who bought a bunch of NFA items and then turned around and went, geez, I should really have a trust. That would be smarter than having these NFA items just directly registered to my name. And so then they turned around and created a trust, and then they had to transfer and apply for another tax stamp for all of those guns to dispose of them from themselves personally into the trust of which they are one of the members of. But you could easily just take every last one of your guns and just transfer it to the trust. You might not be able to do it in Massachusetts because we have a private sale law. And the question is, even though Massachusetts is probably one of those states that gets very, very angry with the idea of corporations and other entities having human rights associated to them, I wonder what they would say about transferring more than 4 firearms in a sitting to a trust. I don't know. I don't want to play that game, but yeah, you would need to set it up now, because the moment the law came into effect, if it was registered to you or if it was in your personal name, transferring over to a trust would in itself be a violation of the law.
Well, the next time we have Benjamin Blatt on, we can ask him.
Yes. But that would be an interesting protection from this law. Though, again, it's been openly stated again, this is going directly against Heller versus DC. We will see also in the coming, months and years as all these cases get sent back to the appeals court, for review, given the decision of NYSERPA, to see how much deeper we go when it comes to banning of firearms in common use as interpreted under under court law. But this ban is just out. It's banning the most common firearms used in America. You're not allowed to do that, and they know that, and they don't care.
Speaking of don't care, this is where we pivot from the bad to the stupid, obnoxious, all of the above.
Well, if you're transitioning to the California one, I just wanted to touch on one more bit of stupidity in this law.
Go ahead and touch the stupid weird.
Yes, is that in I think it was several people, but I've got linked here a Breitbart article on it. It is David Cicilline of Rhode Island. Again, note the state. Was speaking out against one of the features that was banned under this law, which was pistols with stabilizing braces.
Oh, right, this guy.
And he noted, here it is. He pointed to a poster of an AR pistol and said, the stabilizing brace, which is depicted here, when attached here, it turns this weapon into an automatic weapon. It becomes a bump stock, and so it will allow that to essentially be fired like an automatic weapon. Herder. And who was it that called him out? Tom Massey of Kentucky. Yeah, called him out. Just pointing out just how dumb it is for a pistol stabilizing brace to be declared a bump stock. Though, again, I will note, there's been a video I've been tossing around a whole bunch. I'll throw it in the show notes, is of a guy holding up an M1 Garand and saying, this is a gun, it's got a whole lot of wood, it doesn't have an exposed pistol grip and all that, so it can't be an evil assault weapon. And then he stuffs a clip into it and then just hangs it down by his hip and does one of the most buttery smooth bump fires of that gun, where it literally looks like a full auto M14 just dumping away, except for at the end it went and poop, ping,
ping.
Yep, out comes the clip. You don't even hear the ping though, because the shots are just so fast. And I just wanted to point that out, only to state that in fact bump firing is a technique. It is not a piece of hardware. So you can absolutely ban all the equipment that you want, but having it saying that, you know, by getting rid of bump stocks you're getting rid of bump firing is just absolute nonsense. But Aaron, go ahead, pivot away. I didn't mean to steal some of your thunder.
Well, I mean, I've said it once. I don't know if I can capture that lightning in the bottle, but yeah, we are going to move from bad to dumb, because California, you know, honestly, I feel like that can be the punchline of a lot of things, because California. And they've decided that they are going to go against all of the rights. I'm going to let you take this because you're the one who really keyed in on it. But they're going to come down on the Second Amendment, duh, but also on the First and possibly some others. So, all right, Weer'd. What is the stupid coming out from the West Coast this time?
So I will say that it wasn't me that caught this. I first heard this from Mark Smith over at the Reload. I have the article linked, but it is a members exclusive, so it's behind a paywall. Though I will note that Stephen Gutowski charges $10 a month for member access and $100 for a year. And I've certainly found it to be quite worthwhile. Plus, also, you get to be on his podcast. And so I also did that. But the Mark Smith notes that that there's some language in this, and I'll read this out. It is, notwithstanding in any other law, any person, including an entity, attorney, or law firm, who seeks declaratory or injunctive relief to prevent California local governments or government officials from enforcing any statute, ordinance, rule, regulation, or any other type of law that regulates or restricts firearms or represents any litigant seeking that relief, is jointly and severely liable to pay the attorney's fees and costs if of the prevailing party. So essentially they're saying that if you sue us because we're violating the Second Amendment and the courts don't immediately say, oh yeah, you're 100% in the right, California's totally wrong, then you have to pay not only your legal fees, which are not insignificant, but also California's legal fees, which I've got to imagine they might be padding the books because it's not like it's their money. So yeah, this is like it's designed to essentially say, yeah, don't you dare sue us. We've got every stupid gun control law on the planet in effect right now. Don't you dare sue us to say that it's against the Second Amendment, even though I gotta imagine they even know that it is. But he points out that I was thinking, wait, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. I mean, obviously, we've talked a whole bunch about the Phillips family versus Lucky Gunner, where the judge dismissed the case with prejudice and ordered the Phillips family to pay Lucky Gunner's legal fees, which were in excess of $250,000, even though this was before the trial had even started. But that was in civil court. That was not a criminal case. I've never heard about such a law where in a criminal case someone would have to pay the state's legal fees for their wrongdoing. And in fact, there's a reason for that, because again, the First Amendment grants us the right to trial and to redress grievances of the government. So the statement that we are challenging the government and government's laws is protected speech under the First Amendment. Maybe they can find a way to make that so it's not the First Amendment violation that I think it is, but I'm really thinking that like California is making like a Pokemon trainer and just trying to collect every civil right to cage.
And of course, they have come out against the Second Amendment yet again. And so Governor Newsom has Well, I mean, obviously, he's not the one who passed the bill. That's the job of the California legislature. But he's touting this as if it were his own idea. It's got his fingerprints all over it. And what he's done is he has modeled an anti-gun bill off of an anti-abortion bill, which was in Texas. And so this Texas law allows people to pursue legal claims against abortion providers. And so this bill gives people the ability to sue gun manufacturers when the gun is used in gun violence. And the first time I saw this, I was taken aback, and I had to ask Weer'd and the other people. It's like, I could be missing something. Am I uninformed? Or is this law just wholly and completely and preemptively voided by the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act? You know, a federal law which is going to overrule and override anything at state level.
Yes, it is, Aaron, as a matter of fact. Not necessarily everything, because they are putting in, there's verbiage in this that allows for private citizens to sue other private citizens over violating California's gun laws.
But you could always, but couldn't private citizens always sue other private citizens?
Yes, and that even goes for, we talked about we talked about Eli Dickin retaining legal counsel, and so far the police have been praising him as a hero as well. So it doesn't look like he's going to be charged. But again, there could be, I don't know Indiana law well enough, but I assume that there's a possibility for civil action against him. A few states have laws that say that if the courts do not press murder charges or wrongful death charges in a case that is for self-defense, then they won't. Then those people are protected against wrongful death suits or just other civil liability suits for causing harm. But that may not be the case in Indiana. But so they've always had that ability unless it was very specifically protected against. And and I would argue also that the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act kind of is unnecessary, because again, as the super duper tired analogy, but boy, it's a good one. We don't end up suing Budweiser and Ford for when someone goes a drunk driving and kills some people. No, you sue the person for drunk driving, and you jail the person for drunk driving. You don't go and say, well, if Budweiser hadn't made Budweiser Light and if Ford hadn't made the Ford F-150, well, geez, this person wouldn't be able to do anything. That's just a super duper unique to anti-gunners mentality. Though again, we did mention several shows back the case where Jeep is being sued for not having certain safety features that are optional in the car, and we'll see where that goes. I've got to imagine, just like the gun frivolous lawsuits, that it'll just go straight out the window anyway. But it still costs money.
All right, Weer'd. So we've determined that this new law of California's is unconstitutional and isn't going to withstand scrutiny, but how long until it gets slapped down?
I mean, that again takes time. Like, I mean, how long has NYSERPA versus Bruin been brewing? Pun intended. It takes years for this to go through. So, we shall see. And it's also a question of, I mean, the Ninth Circuit has been overall pretty terrible on gun rules, but a blind pig finds an acorn every now and again. So there is a chance that they're just going to be like, yeah, no, we're not going to touch this. We are the laughing stock of the appeals court circuits. So maybe
they certainly won't touch it for the Second Amendment violation, but they might touch it for the First.
That is a possibility. Yeah, we joke about the ACLU counting. Yeah, 1, 3, 4, 5, etc. They're big on First Amendment and Third Amendment and Fourth Amendment and all that. Third Amendment. is a real issue, but I mean, it's a serious amendment. And if you read the history of it, the Third Amendment is no damn joke. And there's a reason why it is right behind the Second Amendment, but it is so egregious that even the very type of people who want to take your AR and your Glock pistol away from you are not going to be quartering troops in your homes. They go through, though, of course, ACLU has been having a little bit of issue with First Amendment stuff with a lot of some of these freedom of speech challenges has been going through. So we shall see. But again, First Amendment certainly has, I mean, Clarence Thomas has stated, well, referring to the Second Amendment as a second class right, in the fact that we just put all of these stipulations and challenges and limitations on it. And he doesn't see similar statements within it, going through, like, you don't need a permit to show the police officer that says that, no, they do need probable cause to frisk you because you paid, $50 for this piece of paper. So yeah, it's going to take time no matter what. Now, to tie us back to the Eli Dickens shooting, Xander gives us his independent thoughts on when and when not to make a shot.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. Earlier this week, I had a chance to try some pest control on the farm using my pistol. A critter that has been harassing and injuring some of the farm's cats that we really like was sitting around and stayed still long enough for me to get my pistol, return, and try to take a shot. And emphasis on try. Unfortunately, I still have to work on my aim, as I managed to hit the dirt instead. This is why I made sure of my backstop angles where people were to try to remove this pest. Looking at where I had hit, I would have hit a two-legged assailant if I had been shooting at something of that size. So at the range I was at, I figure I would have enough time after recognizing the threat to draw, aim, and fire, should that be necessary. In this case, however, I was shooting at a much smaller target, and once again demonstrated that I actually need to get some coaching on firearm use. There was also a little bit of fumbling on my part with the controls. I still have yet to 100% truly familiarize myself with this is how a pistol works. This button here, this button here, this button here. No problem at all rendering it safe. Pop mag release, worked the slide a couple times to remove and ensure that any rounds are gone. And there was that. This also shows that just because one is enthusiastic to enjoy one's Second Amendment rights and all that the rights and responsibilities that accompany that doesn't necessarily mean you're good at it without practice. We all learn at our own rates. You're not a sharpshooter when you're still pretty green. Just a few independent thoughts and considerations. Not a whole lot this week, just event worth noting. So have fun, be safe, and I hope I gave you something to think about.
I gotta say, this was a absolutely great segment in the subject matter that he was covering, because people who have been following me for long enough know that I am a huge fan of Colonel Jeff Cooper. I think he is the philosopher king of the Second Amendment and of modern shooting. And I have most of his books. I'm sure there might be a few that I've missed, but I bought a whole bunch of his books. And interestingly enough, like the Principles of Personal Protection and The Art of the Rifle, when they showed up on my house, I'm like, is that all? Like, this is a book for the great Jeff Cooper, and it's like a pamphlet. They're very, very short books. And then as I read them, I went, oh my God, this was worth every penny I paid for. That just the amount of condensed knowledge that is in there. He is very simple. He is very to the point. And I have found that, like, the way he brings things up is very, very easy to understand, but also at the same time, I never thought of it that way. And Jeff Cooper was an avid hunter. And he speaks a lot about hunting being great training for personal defense and military arms use. And I would note that, unless you are hunting dangerous game, it's a really, really good practice, because you're likely not going to get hurt any more than you were at the range, besides maybe the fact that if you're walking through a field, you could step in a gopher hold and turn an ankle or something like that. But the animal does not want to get shot. It does not want to get killed that day, and it is not going to stick around and wait like a target piece of paper that's hanging on a target hanger that's just going to sit there and wait for you until you're good and ready. No, you've got a period of time before this creature moves on, and you've got to take a shot, and you've got to take a shot with what target is being provided to you and what conditions are being provided to you. And again, I mentioned Art of the Rifle. There's a whole section on Art of the Rifle where first off talks about like all the standard shooting positions, standing, kneeling, prone, couple others that are various shooting positions that you can use. And then there's a whole chapter on what I assume it's Colonel Cooper developed this term, but he called them jackass shooting positions. And oh my God, I remember being out in Colorado, and a friend lent me her rifle and just set me off with some people into the pastures to wipe out some prairie dogs, which are, oh my God, I had no idea how destructive they are. Like, when we got to the first dog town, it looked like a carpet bombing run had gone through this pasture. And so I'm like, oh, well, I definitely want to wipe them out now. But you get stuck in various positions. Like, there was at one point where I had a 300-yard shot on a prairie dog, but the spot that I was in was like filled with sagebrush, so I couldn't go prone. And, I think there was a couple of times where I braced an elbow up against a fence post. And there was a couple of times where I did kind of a rice paddy prone. I've heard people refer to it as, where you're squatting and bracing your elbows on your knees as a way to brace the rifle. But it gave me just enough height to see over the sagebrush, but low enough and locked in enough that it was not quite as good as prone, but that prairie dog isn't going to see another day. So yeah, it is very, very good. And also just, to know where to take the shot. As I was hearing the story, I'm like, oh man, he's going to take out something. And I was hoping actually I could get a chance to talk to Xander before the show started, but he didn't show up. So, but I wanted to know specifically what the critter he was shooting at was, but the idea of shooting at something with just a 9mm handgun, that's a challenging shot, and Xander is fairly green still to shooting that gun. So yeah, he missed. Oh well, but hopefully the creature's scared off and won't come back and pester the animals.
What was the other book you mentioned? There's Art of the Rifle, then there's what else? I
think it's Principles of Personal Defense.
Okay, yes, that is one of his books, and I'm just adding that to my list.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not super duper. Let's see, let's have a look on.
Well, I mean, it depends. If you get it for Kindle, it's not. It's like $8.50. If you want a paperback, $60.
Yes, that's what I've noticed. It appears to be that they are out of print, which is a goddamn shame. You know what? I'm actually trying to get Ian back on the show. I may reach out to see if there's a chance that Headstamp Publishing can get the rights to reprint some of Jeff Cooper's fine works, because oh my God, like I was going to recommend the coffee table book version of Art of the Rifle, and I've got a link in Amazon to it, but I was like, I found one on Amazon that was like $150, and I'm like, I'm not going to recommend anyone spend that much money for a coffee table book, but it is beautiful. I mean, I bought mine over 10 years ago for like, I think it was like, under $30. So it appears that they have gone out of print and the cost has gone way up. But again, the Kindle prices are reasonable. I will say that Principles of Personal Defense is going to be excellent on Kindle. Unless you have the Kindle app on a color tablet, I would not read Art of the Rifle on a Paperwhite, because again, it is much more of a coffee table book format, where there's a lot of like very, very high quality full color pictures that I think are super duper useful at, say, various shooting positions to be in.
Fortunately, I do have a full color tablet.
Excellent. Yeah. And one other statement, since we are talking about principles of personal defense, at no point at all in the entire book is a firearm mentioned in the least. It is purely philosophical about self-defense and personal defense. And it's all about mindset and universal doctrine of personal defense. And it's super valuable. And like I said, it's a pamphlet. I mean, I bet it's 50 pages long. Like, it is super duper duper thin. And literally I got it and I'm like, is that all? And yet, oh my God, it is one of the more important books that I've read in my life.
I feel a bit like a broken record because I've been talking about government statements that are bad or evil or stupid. And so Weer'd is going to Fisk President Biden talking about ghost guns. And this is all of the above.
I mentioned in my last Fisk that I was backlogged with Joe Biden audio. In light of Steve Dettelbach being confirmed as ATF director, I decided it was time to Fisk the audio of the president just before Mr. Dettelbach made his speech that I already covered. President Biden first starts out by talking about his push for restrictions on so-called ghost guns.
The gun lobby tried to tie up the regulators and paperwork for a long, long time. The NRA called this rule I'm about to announce extreme. Extreme. But let me ask you, is it extreme to protect police officers? Extreme to protect our children? Extreme to keep guns out of the hands of people who couldn't even pass a background check?
It wouldn't be extreme to protect police and children, and it wouldn't be extreme to keep guns out of the hands of prohibited people. Unfortunately, the current ATF ruling on ghost guns won't do any of this. End note, he talks about the gun lobby tying up the regulators. Well, these little ATF edicts sidestep all of that. And there has been zero mention of ghost guns in Congress. And with the exception of the ATF director, all of ATF staff are 100% unelected.
Look, the idea that someone on the terrorist list could purchase one of these guns is extreme. It isn't extreme, just basic common sense.
The terror watch list is a joke. The Buffalo grocery store shooter wasn't on the list, nor were the killers in San Bernardino, California, nor were the Boston Marathon bombers, nor was the Pulse nightclub killer. Actual terrorists are not on this list, and the people who are on this list likely aren't even terrorists. So any talk of the terrorist watch list does not win any points with me.
If you buy a couch you have to assemble, it's still a couch. If you order a package like this one over here, that includes the parts you need, the direction of assembling a functioning firearm, you bought a gun. Take a look.
Yeah, I've bought furniture from Wayfair and IKEA that needed assembly. Except I've never needed a power drill or a milling machine to assemble them. Just a screwdriver, an Allen key, maybe a hammer. Same goes for completed receivers. It's not a complete gun, but you can assemble it with simple tools. Meanwhile, 80% kits, you need to mill them out and drill holes. And unlike the furniture or a stripped lower, you do something wrong, you now have a piece of trash in your hands. So yeah, this is more like calling a pile of lumber you bought at a Home Depot a chair.
Take a look at this. It comes in this package. You can see the picture down here maybe. This is the gun. It's not hard to put together.
He's got some 80% kits there, and he claims it's not hard to put them together, but doesn't do it because he can't.
Little drill, hand drill at home. Doesn't take very long. Anyone can order it in the mail. Anyone.
Anybody can order it. I've never done an 80% build because I'm not terribly handy with power tools, and I just know I'll ruin one. And why not just buy a complete gun made by professionals at that point?
A felon, a terrorist, a domestic abuser can go from a gun kit to a gun as little as 30 minutes.
Anybody can order one because it isn't a gun. But if they complete the build, it becomes a gun. And then a felon or a domestic abuser is in violation of the law possessing it. Also, who's completing these kits in 30 minutes?
Buyers aren't required to pass background checks because guns have no serial numbers, these guns. When they show up at a crime scene, they can't be traced. Harder to find and prove who used them. Meaning you can't connect the gun to the shooter and hold them accountable.
I have lots of guns with no serial numbers. Many guns made before 1968 didn't even have serial numbers. But those guns that I bought through shops, I had to pass a background check. And technically the ones I bought through my FFL, well, my FFL is a background check too. No, the reason you can't buy an 80% kit without a background check is the same reason why I can buy a rifle sling without one. Because it isn't a gun.
In fact, the ATF reports that they've been able to trace less than 1% of ghost guns reported by law enforcement.
Yeah, except the ATF has backpedaled on those numbers. Turns out they were counting things like guns with obliterated serial numbers, as well as wild speculation on what was a ghost gun. So yeah, all lies.
These guns are weapons of choice for many criminals. We're going to do everything we can to deprive them of that choice. And when we find them, put them in jail for a long, long time.
Given that criminals can't easily get guns, their weapon of choice is guns they can get. And theft, sharing with other criminals, black market, and straw purchasing is still easier than some ghost gun factory or learning to make one yourself.
And we're acting today. The United States Department of Justice is making it illegal for a business to manufacture one of these kits without a serial number. Illegal.
So dumb. The whole point of these kits is that they aren't complete, so therefore don't need to count as guns. Of course, the ATF ruling doesn't specify what % of completion it needs to be before a ghost gun is so not a gun that it just becomes a thing. So in theory, Home Depot is just filled with ghost guns. Not that the ATF is going to raid them for selling ghost gun kits without a license.
Today, weapons like the one used in Saugus High School and to ambush deputies with us that are here with us today are being treated like the deadly firearms they are.
The Saugus High School shooting in California is still pretty fishy. I've yet to see a report on what kit the killer used there. I consistently read that it was a .45 caliber. I've even read that it was a 1911, which is a metal frame gun, generally not easily milled from an 80% kit. Given that we've seen guns with obliterated serial numbers called ghost guns, I have my doubts about the gun used in this shooting.
And if somebody sells a ghost gun to a federally licensed dealer, for example, a pawn shop, that dealer must make the firearm and mark it with a serial number before reselling it. All of a sudden, it's no longer a ghost. It has a return address. And it's going to help save lives, reduce crime, and get more criminals off the streets.
Except you can't just write a serial number on a gun and call it serialized. Not only does the number need to be engraved or stamped deep enough to resist tampering, but the ATF ruling has even stricter serial number guidelines for dealers marking homemade guns than actual makers have for marking their own guns. The end result is not ghost guns getting serial numbers and then the ability to be traced, but dealers telling customers to take the gun out of their shops if they attempt to sell or have it worked on. Good job, guys.
If you commit a crime with a ghost gun, expect federal prosecution. Not just state, expect federal prosecution.
Kind of like the federal hate crime laws. You know, stuff that's talked about a lot, but actually used almost never.
In addition to today's rule, we're working on 4 areas. First, We're going after rogue gun dealers. The last time we had data on this was more than 20 years ago. 5% of gun dealers sold 90% of illegal guns found at crime scenes. 5% sold 90%.
We've talked about this before. If rogue dealers are such an elite and nefarious class of gun dealers, why not just focus ATF audits on them? It would be so simple. It isn't so simple, because bad apple or rogue dealers are most often dealers who operate near high crime areas, and in fact are doing nothing wrong. Just the nature of high crime areas means more guns are stolen, and the chance of a straw buyer showing up is higher.
These merchants of death are breaking the law for profit, selling guns that are killing innocent people. We're cracking down on these gun dealers and the violent criminals they knowingly arm.
You notice he doesn't name any of these rogue dealers, because if he did, that would be straight up slander, because none of this crap he just said was true.
We're disrupting illegal gun trafficking. Attorney General Garland has directed all U.S. attorneys to prioritize combating gun trafficking that is moving guns across state lines and city boundaries.
The iron pipeline, where criminals go from high crime cities where the gun laws are strict and travel to much lower crime areas where the gun laws are much more lax. They load up on guns and then they bring them back. Of course, this isn't true. Number one, we have ATF Trace Data that simply doesn't reflect this. I have the data for New York and Illinois in the show notes. In the data, not only does the bulk of crime guns come from within the state, the time to crime numbers are over a decade, meaning the gun was last legally transferred many years before it showed up at a crime scene. This simply shows that people move about the country and they take their guns with them. And when they land in a high crime area, those guns have a higher chance of being stolen. Further, if criminals were traveling to gun-friendly states to load up on illegal guns, why aren't they mugging and robbing people there?
But none of this absolves Congress, with all due respect to my members of Congress here, they're the wrong people I'd be talking to, for the responsibility to act. We need Congress to pass universal background checks.
They tried right after you took office, and they failed. They recently got a gun control bill passed, but honestly, most of the gun stuff was stripped off, and even the super anti-gun House bill didn't have universal background checks. It's a born loser, Joe.
And I know it's controversial, but I got it done once. Ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
In 1994, AR-15s and AK pattern rifles were quite rare, and the Wonder 9 revolution was just taking off, and still most cops in the 90s still carried revolvers. None of this stuff is true anymore. Plus, the public has been well versed in what liars anti-gunners are, so you won't be able to convince the voters that the very gun they own is a machine gun or a weapon of war. But Congress is trying again right now, so let's see how that goes for them.
I was getting criticized when I first passed this law when I was a senator. And guess what? I was down in southern Delaware, do a lot of hunting and fishing down there. And I was walking up one of the creek beds. And the guy standing there said, "You want to take my gun?" I said, "No, I'll take your gun." He said, "Well, you're telling me I can't have more than X number of bullets in my gun." And I said, "What do you think, the deer you're hunting or wear Kevlar vests? What the hell you need 20 bullets for? You must be a hell of a terrible shot." I'm serious. Think about it. Think about the mass shootings. As many as 100 rounds. It's a weapon of war. There's nothing to do with recreation.
This interchange didn't happen so hard, it made things that did happen unhappen. Still, the Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's about defending our lives from enemies, both foreign and domestic. And Joe doesn't want to take your gun?
So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for my guns.
Bingo. You're right if you have an assault weapon. The fact of the matter is they should be illegal, period. Look, the Second Amendment doesn't say you can't restrict the kinds of weapons people can own. You can't buy a bazooka. You can't have a flamethrower.
When you say you want to take my guns, I'll believe you.
Eliminate gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. They're the only outfit. They're the only outfit in the country that is immune. Imagine had the tobacco industry been immune to being sued. Come on.
This is just untrue. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act was done because frivolous lawsuits were being leveled against gun companies, and not a single judge ruled that the companies had done anything wrong. No other industry has had to endure such lawfare. So Congress had to act to keep American businesses from being bankrupted simply through legal fees and court actions. As far as the tobacco company lawsuits, in all of them, people died or got sick from using tobacco in the prescribed method. Gun companies are not protected from these type of lawsuits. If a gun was made so unsafe that it harms or kills operators or bystanders who are not downrange, or if it was made with toxic chemicals that make people horribly ill, then the gun companies totally could be sued. But that's not what Joe Biden wants to do. He wants gun companies to go bankrupt.
In February, the families of 9 of the Sandy Hook shooting victims achieved a settlement against the maker of guns that was used to kill their children.
A settlement, not a verdict. And it wasn't even from the gun company, which was Remington, as it was bankrupt and dissolved at the time. Instead, it was from the company that controlled the liability insurance who paid out, probably just to be done with it.
And here's why it's so important. Remember, it wasn't until we saw the internal documents that we really understood what cigarette manufacturers are doing to our kids and our families. Now, we may begin to see what gun manufacturers are and are not doing when it comes to making and marketing their deadly products.
I wonder what sinister actions he thinks gun companies are doing. I suspect they're selling the guns the public wants. But that's only coming from someone who talked with countless gun makers and industry insiders. So what do I know?
And by the way, it's going to sound bizarre. I support the Second Amendment. You have a right. But from the very beginning, the Second Amendment didn't say you can own any gun you want, as big as you want. You couldn't buy a cannon when, in fact, the Second Amendment passed. And certain people from the very beginning weren't allowed to purchase guns. It's nothing new. It's just rational.
We heard the cannon crap before, and I left in that flamethrower line. They're just as legal as cannons. You can mail order or build your own right now. Let's be honest, Biden knows nothing about gun laws. But he also hates the Second Amendment. Linked is the White House official statement on NYSERPA v. Bruen. I quote, "I urge states to continue to enact and enforce common sense laws to make their citizens and communities safer from gun violence. As the late Justice Scalia recognized, the Second Amendment is not absolute. For centuries, states have regulated who may purchase or possess weapons, the types of weapons they may use, and the places they may carry those weapons. And the courts have upheld those regulations. They upheld those regulations until now. So no, Joe Biden directly opposes the Second Amendment. Not that that should surprise anybody. Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them."
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and even if I drill down on the things which I think are garbage, we will be here for a long time. There's basically 3 points that I want to make, and you kind of missed them, but it was a target-rich environment. You hit the important parts. Okay, so Biden's talking about the Second Amendment, and you can't own a cannon. The issuance of letters of marque and reprisal is literally in our government. I'm not sure if it's the Constitution or just other parts of law. Pardon me?
Article 1, I believe it's Section 8, but I'd have to look that back up, but it is Article 1 of the US Constitution.
Okay, there we go. And letters of marque and reprisal, back during the Revolutionary War and other wars, we would issue these, and these were essentially hunting permits for ships to go after the shipping of the nations at which we were at war. It was essentially a license to be a pirate against one particular nation so long as you didn't engage in atrocities. But, if we're at war with the British, hey, you can go raid British ships and loot them and come back and sell their cargo at American ports, and that's hunky-dory. And you know how you would do that? You would buy cannons, and you would put them on your ship, because that's how ships fought. So, yes, you could, in fact, buy a cannon. I think before the Second Amendment was written.
Oh, absolutely.
So he's wrong about that. He mentions you can't buy a flamethrower. Wrong. So Maryland is the only state that bans flamethrowers. And even then, if you get a permit, you can have one. It's highly restricted in California, just like pretty much everything else in California. But the point being is that in 48 other states, flamethrowers are regarded as agricultural tools. You use it to burn away underbrush. You use it to melt ice. They are tools. And in fact, no less than the ATF. The ATF doesn't define flamethrowers as weapons. They're not included in the NFA. And the ATF has outright stated that regulating them is outside of the agency's purview.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, Biden is not just wrong, he's fractally wrong. And then finally, his claim that not everyone could own a gun. Okay, this one is true. Hey, Weer'd, do you know who couldn't own a gun during the time the Second Amendment was written?
Well, definitely slaves. I knew that because they weren't considered people.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that black freedmen couldn't as well, at least for a good part.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly later on in the United States history, it did. I don't know about at the time of the ratification.
Mm-hmm. I believe Native Americans also couldn't own guns.
That is correct.
So, yeah, he's right. He's not making the point he wants to make.
No. No, he is not. Yeah.
And I think that kind of summarizes that entire speech of his. Whatever point you're making, it's not the point you think you're making.
Mm-hmm. Though I will have to say, I thought about this as I was writing up the show notes, because I obviously did the Fisk before I wrote up the show notes. And I realized in reading the remarks of Jerry Nadler saying this is the point of the bill is to ban guns in common use. And the Joe Biden is, I mean, of course, 1 million years old, and he makes Jerry Nadler look like a spring chicken, which is saying something. But Joe Biden closes off that speech saying that he supports the Second Amendment, despite there being absolutely no evidence of that. But that is a very, very standard saw for anti-gun politicians, is to claim that they support the Second Amendment without really giving any evidence to why they are, why we might think that they support the Second Amendment.
Remember, this is the same guy who gave us the staggeringly bad legal advice to get a shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think someone is breaking into your house, basically to go up to the window and fire 2 blasts out the window to scare them away.
Correct.
Do not listen to this man. This is bad legal advice that will get you at the very best fined and at worst arrested.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't know it then. He sure doesn't know it now.
Yes, but we have gone from the world of the 90s and early 2000s where the anti-gunners are saying no one's coming for your guns. Nobody wants to take your guns away. We just want these common sense gun control laws, and let's be honest, most of the time that they were saying that, no, we don't want to take your guns away, or at least we don't think we can get away with taking your guns away, but we are going to take the guns away from your children. This new assault weapons ban that's coming through says that my daughter should never own a firearm because she is not old enough to take possession of a firearm, at least, at an FFL, and no, she will never be able to because these guns will not be allowed to be transferred. But it's gone from that to now the Beto O'Rourke hells yeah, we want to take away your guns. Like, they're just letting the mask completely drop, which I salute them. I appreciate them being more honest. I think this debate needs more honesty, not less. But it is certainly an interesting contrast to see of Jerry Nadler saying that that's the whole point of this bill to compared to Joe Biden saying, I support the Second Amendment and I want to take away all your guns.
Yeah, he's a butter. I support the Second Amendment, but... And every time you hear that, you can just... you know the next part is going to be anti-Second Amendment.
Yes. Yeah.
You can stop listening.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, you don't. Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like our hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump, where we talk about Eli Dickon dunking on this willowy little snowflake.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
You can get more from me on my blog. It's weirdworld.com, and you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network. And I'll note that the last two shows that we have done have had both David and Oddball on them, so you can get a little bit of ACP taste mixed in with Handgun Radio. Also, I will note that there's going to be a new blooper reel coming up, and I'm calling it the Handgun Radio crossover section because there's a lot of Handgun Radio bloopers on it.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music. Eli Dickon scored 8 for 10 at 40 yards on a moving target. And I don't think Aaron and I can. Our shooting abilities are assorted, and so is our podcast.
It's the truth. Good night, everybody.
Good night.